The kiss is perfect. Annoyingly, infuriatingly, cinematically perfect. We're at the top of the Eiffel Tower, the city lights of Paris sprawling below us like a blanket of fallen stars. His lips are warm, tasting faintly of the overpriced champagne we bought from a kiosk. The ridiculous, twinkling lights of the tower are practically buzzing in time with my heartbeat. It's the full cliché, the money shot, the scene you fast forward to in every rom-com. Wait, don't roll your eyes yet. I know what this looks like. You're thinking, great, another American finding love in the city of lights. Groundbreaking. But if you think this is another Emily in Paris knockoff, let me tell you how we actually got here. Excel, rain, a disaster of a French fling, and Paris itself trying to kill me. This moment wasn't inevitable. It was improbable. It was fought for, earned through a gauntlet of beige conference rooms and existential dread. Trust me, after you hear my story, you'll never look at pivot tables or tourist traps the same way again. Let's be clear, I don't love spreadsheets. I love control. In a world of chaos, a well-organized data set is my sanctuary. I'm Noah, the guy who can make numbers behave, and my company loves me for it. They do not, however, love their annual training budget, which was about to expire. This is how I ended up with a mandatory invitation to a week-long Advanced Excel Efficiencies seminar. My soul withered at the thought. I could teach the damn course. But then I saw the location, Paris. Suddenly, this wasn't a punishment, it was a loophole. A free flight and a hotel room in the most romantic city in the world, all disguised as professional development. The seminar was just the price of admission for the real mission, deploying the pilot episode of my own glamorous European life. My apartment was a chaotic mess of open suitcases and discarded outfits. Should I pack the sleek black turtleneck for a potential evening of philosophical debate in a smoky jazz club, or the breezy linen shirt for a spontaneous picnic along the Seine? I packed both. My imagination was already running wild. I envisioned myself on a charming Parisian balcony, a glass of Bordeaux in hand, laughing at something witty said by a handsome stranger named Jean-Luc. He'd be a poet, of course, or maybe a sculptor, something ridiculously French and impractical. He wouldn't care about my VLOOKUP skills, but he'd be captivated by the meticulously crafted persona I was packing. We'd fall into a whirlwind romance, my New York cynicism melting away under the Parisian sky. I imagined the Instagram posts, the carefully curated stories of me looking effortlessly chic in front of the Louvre, a single croissant placed artfully on a bistro table. My friends would be sick with envy. He's living the dream, they'd text. And I would be. My life, neatly organized and beautifully presented, was about to import a whole new data set of romantic European experiences. As I strutted through JFK, my carry-on gliding behind me like a loyal sidekick, I felt an unshakable sense of confidence. The plane took off, I leaned back in my seat, took a sip of complimentary sparkling wine, and smiled. I was off to claim my story. Paris, I thought, with a dramatic flair worthy of a silent film star, I have arrived. Prepare to be conquered. Paris, it turned out, had no intention of being conquered. In fact, it seemed to have read my meticulously planned script and decided to use it for kindling. The first sign that my movie was about to go horribly wrong came at baggage claim. The carousel spun around and around, a sad, lonely parade of other people's luggage, until it eventually ground to a halt. My suitcase, containing my entire carefully curated Parisian wardrobe, including the crucial black turtleneck, was enjoying an unscheduled vacation in Frankfurt. Paris 1, Noah 0. Fine, I could handle that. I was adaptable. I was resilient. What I couldn't handle was the sky opening up the second I stepped outside the airport building. It wasn't a romantic drizzle, it was a cold, vengeful downpour that instantly soaked my trousers. My hair, which I had spent 20 minutes coiffing into a state of casual perfection, plastered itself to my forehead. Also, my brand new, very expensive suede shoes were ruined in seconds. Paris 2, Noah 0. Shivering, I flagged down a taxi. The driver looked me up and down, his expression a mixture of pity and disdain, and proceeded to take me on a scenic tour of every traffic jam in the greater Paris metropolitan area. The meter ticked up with an alarming speed, a digital reminder of just how much this misery was costing me. By the time we arrived at my hotel, a charming boutique that looked suspiciously like it shared a wall with a laundromat, the fare was astronomical. I paid, my spirit shrinking with my bank account. I stumbled into the lobby, dripping a puddle onto the floor, and approached the front desk. I took a deep breath, summoned all the high school French I could remember, and aimed for a sophisticated world traveler vibe. Bonjour, I said, trying for a smooth, melodic greeting. Instead, what came out was a strangled, watery sound, less of a word and more of a sneeze. The concierge just stared. My room was compact. The Parisian balcony I dreamed of was a small ledge overlooking a dumpster. Paris 3, Noah 0. After a lukewarm shower in a hotel room the size of a postage stamp, I gave myself a stern talking to. So what if my luggage was in Germany? I was in Paris. The night was young. I would not be defeated by a rip-off taxi driver and some cold, wet, disappointing meteorological mid-fortune. I put on my only other shirt, which was now slightly damp from being in my backpack, and marched out the door determined to seize Paris by the throat. Romance was contractually obligated to happen here. I ditched the tourist traps and ducked into a small, cozy wine bar I found tucked away on a side street. The kind of place with exposed brick and low, flattering lighting. It was perfect. And then I saw him. He was leaning against the bar, all effortless French style and smoldering looks. He had dark, messy hair, a jawline that could cut glass. And he was laughing at something the bartender said. It was so cinematic, I almost expected a camera crew to appear. Taking a breath, I ordered a glass of red wine, my French miraculously returning to me, and found a small table nearby. Our eyes met. A spark. He smiled. Chemistry. He walked over. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, his English laced with a perfect movie star accent. We spent the next 2 hours in a whirlwind of witty banter and flirtatious smiles. His name was Julien, graphic designer, immaculate jawline, and a laugh that made the bartender compass olives. The conversation flowed as easily as the wine. He touched my arm when he laughed, his eyes crinkled at the corners. It felt unreal, like my departure fantasy was finally loading correctly. When he leaned in to kiss me as we stood on the rain-slicked sidewalk outside, it was straight out of a movie, soft, intoxicating, and full of promise. The night was saved. My Parisian dream was back on schedule. When the check arrived, a hairline crack ran through the fantasy. "You must be very successful," he said, leaning back as we shared one last glass of wine, the check sitting pointedly on his side of the table. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. "Hardly. I mostly just make spreadsheets look pretty." His smile faltered. Not mercenary, more embarrassed. "The rent, the prices. I've been skipping dinners this week," he admitted. The spell changed shape. Not a user, exactly, just a man who didn't want to say he couldn't afford the Romcom. I paid. He gave me a breezy peck and vanished into the metro glow. "Fine," I muttered to the city. "Paris, you win. 4-0, if you counted." I stood there, damp and newly allergic to cinematic promises. There is no place on earth more soul-crushing than a beige conference room. And the one I found myself in on Monday morning was the beigiest of them all. Beige walls, beige carpet, beige chairs. The only splash of color was the aggressively cheerful PowerPoint presentation titled "Unlocking the Magic of Advanced Data Analysis." My trainer, a relentlessly cheerful man named Jean-Luc, not the handsome artist from my fantasy, but a short, balding man with an enthusiasm for pivot tables that bordered on pathological, was explaining the nuances of the sum-if function. He said, "Imagine," he eye-glinged, "you have all this data, a sea of numbers, and you, with this one beautiful formula, can make it sing." After a short blank, or maybe a short nap, he was explaining the beauty of the unique function. He said, "Imagine the possibilities." I imagined the possibility of continuing the nap under the table. My soul was slowly dying of boredom. Every click of Jean-Luc's mouse a tiny nail in the coffin of my will to live. I glanced around at the other attendees, a sad collection of international business travelers, and that's when I saw him. Slumped in his chair across the room was another foreigner, looking even more miserable than I felt. He had dark curly hair and was staring at the presentation with a look of profound existential despair. He caught my eye and gave a subtle, almost imperceptible roll of his eyes. During the first coffee break, we ended up next to each other at the sad little pastry tray. "I think I'd rather be audited by every tax agency on the planet and listen to another word about nested if statements," he muttered with a distinctly Italian accent. "I'm Matteo, by the way." I let out a short, sharp laugh. "I'm Noah," I said. "Imagine the possibilities. You could get a unique choir of singing formulas." He snorted, then said, "Figurati." I guess that was the Italian way of saying, "Imagine that." The chemistry was instant. We shared the same dry sense of humor, which desperately needed a fire extinguisher. We were comrades in misery. The second day was just as beige, but Matteo and I sat together, laptops open, minds elsewhere, dueling in a shared Google Doc on the disposable training laptops. The guest accounts wiped themselves at logout, like our jokes were spies self-destructing. Jean-Luc, and now we will spend 1 hour on the elegant power of concatenate. I think my soul just tried to escape my body. Mine already left. It's probably at the bar somewhere, living its best life. At lunch, we fled the conference room. Huddled under an awning to escape another sudden downpour, we started comparing notes on our respective Parisian disappointments. My airline lost my luggage. My Airbnb host left me a single damp towel and a list of 47 rules, one of which was, "Do not sing," he countered. I got scammed on a romantic evening by a guy who thought I was his personal sugar daddy. Matteo winced in sympathy. Ouch. I was told by a waiter yesterday that my attempt to order in French was a crime against the language. Figurati. We burst out laughing, a shared, cathartic release. The more we talked, the more we realized we were victims of the same bait and switch. We had both bought into the romantic, movie-set version of Paris and had been slapped in the face by the cold, wet, expensive reality. "You know," I said, "I'm starting to think this whole city is a scam. Maybe the Eiffel Tower is just scaffolding covered in tinfoil." He laughed, a real, genuine laugh that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "And the Mona Lisa is probably just a very convincing printout." A running gag was born. Over bad conference coffee, we started a list on a napkin titled, "Things We Officially Hate About Paris." Our shared disappointment became a strange kind of bond, a lifeline in a sea of beige. We were two shipwrecked souls, clinging to a raft of sarcasm and mutual disdain for the city of love. Our friends back home, watching our lives through the tiny window of WhatsApp, expected the hits. They wanted to see the Louvre, Notre Dame, the romantic bridges over the Seine. So we gave them the hits. After our Excel-induced coma ended each day, Matteo and I set out on a series of typical tourist adventures. We became partners in crime, documenting our amazing time for our WhatsApp statuses. We stood in front of the Louvre, not to admire the art, but to take a selfie with the most unimpressed expressions we could muster. "Just saw a painting of some lady," I captioned it. "She looked bored too." We took a boat tour on the Seine, but we spent the entire time providing our own sassy alternative narration. "On your left, you'll see another beautiful historic building that you probably can't afford to live in, figurati," Matteo announced to our section of the boat, earning a few glares and a couple of stifled laughs. We criticized the architecture, the color of the water, and the questionable fashion choices of our fellow tourists. We ate crepes from a street vendor, then spent 10 minutes debating whether they were just glorified, overpriced pancakes. "I've had better at IHOP," I declared to Matteo's delight. But then, something strange started to happen. In between the cynicism, the Parisian magic began to seep in. We stood in Montmartre, ready to mock the hordes of people watching the sunset. But as the sky exploded in shades of pink and orange over the city skyline, we fell silent. The view was annoyingly breathtaking. "Okay," Matteo admitted quietly, "that's not terrible." I just nodded, suddenly very aware of how close he was standing next to me.
Later that evening, huddled in a corner bistro to escape the rain, who suddenly showed up like a storm that knew exactly when to crash the scene, the conversation softened. We talked about our lives back home, our jobs, our bad dates. I found myself admiring the way he talked with his hands, the genuine warmth in his eyes when he laughed at one of my dumb jokes. "I swear," I said, into the quiet, the confession surprising even myself, "if I have to VLOOK up one more quarterly report, my soul will officially be declared a null value. Sometimes I feel like I'm just sorting data in a life I didn't actually choose." The easy humor left Matteo's face, replaced with something more thoughtful. He traced the rim of his wine glass, avoiding my eyes for a moment. "That's actually why I'm here," he said softly. "I wasn't sent. I volunteered." I stared at him. "You chose to endure Jean-Luc's love affair with Concatenate? Are you insane?" A small smile touched his lips, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Maybe. Things back home in Milan, they're fine. Too fine. The job, the apartment, it feels like a life someone else would be happy with." He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. "I felt stuck, so I had this crazy idea, run away to Paris. I thought maybe I'd find something, I don't know, a sign. Something to prove the big cinematic romance wasn't just good marketing." He let out a short, frustrated sigh. "Instead, I found the city's entire annual rainfall and a masterclass on nested if statements." "So you came looking for a spark," I said, the parallel almost painful, "and you landed in the beigest room on earth." Matteo looked up, and his gaze was so direct it felt like a physical touch. The smile that spread across his face this time was slow and genuine. "Yes," he said, his voice low and warm. "The beigest room on earth." He paused, letting the moment hang in the air between us. "But the thing about a boring background is that it makes the interesting things pop." My breath caught. He wasn't talking about the room anymore. On our last night, after the seminar had officially concluded, we were celebrating our survival with cheap wine and a surprisingly delicious kebab from a shop near my hotel. We sat on a bench, the conversation easy and familiar. The list of things we hated about Paris had been forgotten. "You know," I said, "for a city that's actively tried to ruin my life, this week hasn't been a complete disaster." "Only because we had each other to complain to," Matteo said, smiling. He looked at me, his smile fading slightly into something more serious. "Noah, The air shifted. The sarcastic barrier we'd built around ourselves dissolved, and for the first time, something genuinely romantic was about to happen. He leaned in slightly, his eyes searching mine. My heart hammered against my chest. This was it. And then, his phone trilled. He flinched, switched to rapid Italian the way people switch to their native language only when they're scared. Scusa, un minuto." He paced. Ended the call looking gutted. "Crisis. I have to fix a file before their morning." We hugged in the kind of awkward panic hug that promises more. Then he was gone. I reached for my phone to text him and froze. We'd been messaging inside the training's guest Slack. Access expired at midnight. Our shared doc lived behind those ghost accounts. We had no numbers, no last names. We'd been smart and somehow stupid. Now he was just gone. I had lost my chance. The company had booked us one extra day in Paris for cultural enrichment, which I'd planned to spend with Matteo, probably making fun of more culture. Now the day stretched before me, empty and gray. I decided to show up for the optional, informal Q&A session with Jean-Luc that morning, mostly on the off chance Matteo might do the same. He didn't. The beige conference room felt cavernous without him. Jean-Luc's enthusiastic breakdown of the anemic parts of a pivot table, once a source of shared ridicule, was now just crushingly boring. I missed the snarky comments, the eye rolls, the silent communication that said, "We're in this together." I missed him. Figurati, as he'd say. The sadness hit me with a surprising force. This wasn't just about a missed connection. It was about losing the one person who had made Paris feel less of an antagonist and more like an adventure. I couldn't leave it like this. I couldn't let our story end with a business call and a half-eaten kebab. I made a decision. It was absurd, illogical, and had a statistical probability of success close to zero. I was going to find him. But where in a city of over 2 million people do you even begin to look for one specific, sarcastic Italian man you only know by his first name? I had no data points, no search parameters. All I had was a hunch, a ridiculous, rom-com-fueled sliver of hope. I had to think, where would a fellow cynic, a partner in anti-tourism, go on his last day in Paris? There was only one answer.
It was the place we had mocked the most. The one landmark we had mutually agreed was too much of a cliché to even bother with. It was the final boss of Parisian tourism. It was so stupid, it had to be the right answer. Maybe he too had decided to finally face the ultimate cliché as a final act of surrender. The Eiffel Tower was exactly as we described it, a giant, glittering tourist trap. The base was swarming with people taking selfies and vendors selling cheap light-up souvenirs. A security guard waved us from a closed stairwell. I jogged the long way around, lungs burning, bargaining with the city I'd insulted all week. And then I saw him. He was standing off to the side, away from the main crush, looking up at the illuminated iron lattice with a thoughtful, almost sad expression on his face. Total scam, right? I said, slightly out of breath. He turned, and a slow smile spread across his face, lighting up his eyes. The biggest! I came here to confirm my hypothesis. Figurati. And, he said, his voice soft, it's annoyingly beautiful. Yeah, I admitted. It kind of is. We stood in silence for a moment, the energy from our week of inside jokes and shared glances crackling between us. I'm sorry about yesterday, he said finally. My boss is intense. I thought you were just done, that this was just a work thing. He stepped closer, his gaze serious. Noah, this week was the only thing that wasn't a work thing. It was the only thing that felt real. The look was not just a look. It was a full-blown, silent conversation. It said, "Are we really doing this?" And "This is insane," and "I don't want to be anywhere else in the world." He finally broke the spell, his grin a slash of warmth in the cold air. "Right, no sense in fighting it," he declared, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "We have to go full cliché now. It's the law." A bubble of laughter escaped me, sharp and real. "Then you better be a damn good cliché," I shot back, my heart doing a staccato rhythm against my ribs. He led the way, and we bought tickets to the top. As the tiny elevator carried us upward, the city shrinking below, all the sarcasm melted away. Our hands had found the same railing. Our fingers didn't move away. We stepped out on the viewing platform, the wind whipping around us, the city lights twinkling into life as dusk settled. It was cheesy. It was over the top, and it was perfect. And then, right at that moment, as if on cue from a rom-com director in the sky, the tower's lights began to sparkle, 1,000 points of light shimmering against the dark Paris sky. Matteo laughed, a low, warm sound. "You've got to be kidding me." "It's a little on the nose, isn't it?" I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. "We're supposed to mock the cliché," he murmured, his eyes fixed on mine. "We are." I agreed, my voice barely a whisper. Or, he closed the small gap between us. Or, we could just give in. And then, he kissed me. It wasn't a transactional movie set kiss like the one on my first night. His mouth was warm, champagne sweet with a hint of caffeine. This was real and messy and earned through a week of shared misery and unexpected joy. At the top of the most overused backdrop in the world, with the city of lights sparkling around us, our story finally got its perfect, cliché ending. So, there you have it. That's how I ended up in a full-blown, postcard-perfect cliché on top of the Eiffel Tower. I would have mocked it on Monday, but it became the only honest ending by Friday. It wasn't the story I came here to write, the one I'd meticulously charted out in my head. That story imploded somewhere between my lost luggage and a transactional kiss on a rainy street. What I learned is that the Paris you see in movies is just marketing. It's a beautiful, expensive, and often inconvenient city that couldn't care less about your romantic fantasies. But the real magic of Paris, the kind that actually changes you, isn't found on a picturesque bridge or in a charming bistro. It's found in the moments you don't plan for. It's the unexpected bond forged over a shared hatred for corporate PowerPoints, the comfort of a shared laugh and a downpour, and the quiet joy of finding the one other person in a city of millions who gets your specific brand of sarcasm. As for what's next, we don't have a 5-year plan. He's still serious about quitting his job and finding a life that feels less predictable, and I'm starting to think my own carefully sorted life could use a beautiful, chaotic variable thrown into the mix. Maybe he'll find a reason to come to New York for an advanced knitting seminar. Maybe I'll discover a sudden passion for living in Milan. Figurati. For the first time, the future feels less like a spreadsheet to be perfected and more like an open road. The City of Lights didn't give me the story I wanted. It gave me something better, something real. For that, and for him, I'll be forever grateful. Even if it did ruin a perfectly good pair of shoes.